In this video, I will explain to you the concept of fuzzy aiming as it is implemented in the generic interaction component. The idea of fuzzy aiming is that if you have multiple interactables together, such as these lights, fuzzy aiming helps determine the intent of the player. Now, on the right here, you'll see that in my first-person character blueprint, I have my interaction component selected and I've enabled this debug line drawing. And this here is to visualize what fuzzy aiming is doing. As you can see here, there's a red dot on my screen, and that's the center of the camera projected onto the world. Now, as I move around, you'll see that based on that red dot, even though I'm not directly looking at this interactable behind this one here, you'll see that it is my intended interactable. It is closest to my crosshair, and even though it's further and behind these guys here, it still takes priority. However, if I move back down here, you'll see that my intent is now determined to be this light here. And so this allows you to easily have a bunch of things in the world and your player will still be able to interact with the right interactable without too much hassle. Now you can customize this behavior a little bit if you want to, and that's all determined in this generic interaction component. For example, if you don't want to do a line trace but you want to do a box trace, because you prefer box tracing for this, there's an option down here under config called be use box trace instead of line. And this just, instead of using a line trace, it does a box trace. And that allows you to kind of do interactable checks against things that might be weirdly shaped and have weird collisions, something that a line trace might not be perfect for. So here now you see that there's a green cube as opposed to just a red dot point, and that's using a box trace. Now this example here doesn't really show off why would you use a box trace, and a box trace is typically more expensive than a line trace, so it's something I don't recommend, but it is an option if you need it. Now another thing here that we can customize is the minimum dot product. Think of the minimum dot product as how close the object has to be to your crosshair. If I set this to 0.45, that this dot product, it's kind of hard to visualize and explain what this number means in terms of its correlation between the dot product and the angle. But 0.45 means you can pretty much interact with something to your far right here. So as you can see, even though I'm aiming way over here, the interactable way over here to my right is highlighted. And 0.45 is usually about a 180 degree cone in front of you. Now the default 0.925 is about 10 degrees, and I find that works pretty well. But if you want a wider range, you can go ahead and decrease this, or if you want a tighter range, you can increase it. Now if you don't want fuzzy focus or fuzzy aiming at all, you can just simply uncheck this box here, and now instead of fuzzy aiming being applied, you will have to directly look at your interactables. So if you're just slightly off of your interactable by a pixel or two, it will no longer be focused, and you have to be aiming directly at it, like so. See how this red dot is off this light here? Only until that center point is on the light is it interactable with. And this is kind of a more of an old school approach, kind of makes things a little frustrating to work with, but some people prefer it. And that is why fuzzy focus is on by default, because it's great. Now, if you don't want to use dot product based checking, if you want to use based on distance, by checking this box, the fuzzy focus algorithm changes a bit in that it's less about how close the object is to the middle of your screen, but more of the distance between where you're looking at in the world and the object's center. Now, as you can see here, with minimum distance, here we're not really looking at anything because our threshold is too low. But if we take a look at this here, you'll see that we get this weird clipping behavior here, where even though this interactable is technically closer to our crosshair, this interactable is closer to the red dot in the world, and thus it is prioritized. So again, it's just another way of doing fuzzy focus and fuzzy aiming. I prefer dot product over distance, but again, the option is there. And that is fuzzy aiming in a nutshell. That everything you can customize here is here. If you want to do interactable traces on a different trace channel, you can do that here. And if you want to do complex collision as opposed to simple collision, you can enable that here as well. And that's fuzzy aiming. Thank you for watching. Alright, so that explanation